Connor. Lauren Sterling's voice didn't rise. It never did. Denise is in surgery. You're coming to Milwaukee with me. 6 a.m. tomorrow. And Connor. She finally looked up, and something in her eyes made his chest go cold. Don't make me regret this. He drove home that night wondering if she already did. If you're new here, hit subscribe, stay until the very end, and drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Connor Hayes had learned to be small, not in a self-pitying way. Not the kind of small that feels sorry for itself. The practical kind. The kind you learn when you're the only parent in the house and the electricity bill is due, and your 9-year-old daughter asks why you look tired, and you say, "I'm not tired, Bug. I'm just thinking," because she doesn't need to carry what you carry. The kind of small that makes you good at your job without ever threatening anyone above you. The kind that keeps you employed, keeps the lights on, keeps Lily in her school with the good art program. He was very, very good at being small. He was standing in his kitchen staring at Lauren Sterling's number still glowing on his phone screen when Lily walked in and said, "Daddy, the pasta's boiling over." He grabbed the pot, turned down the burner, stared at the water hissing against the stovetop. "Daddy?" "Yeah, Bug." "You have that face." He looked at his daughter, 9-year-old gap between her front teeth, wearing a t-shirt that said, "Scientists do it with precision," that she'd gotten from a birthday party and refused to stop wearing, even though she had no idea what it meant. She was watching him with the particular attention of a child who had learned early that when a parent goes quiet, something is shifting in the world. "I have to go to Milwaukee," he said. "Tomorrow morning, with my boss." Her eyes widened. "Your boss, the one you never talk about." "I talk about her. You said she once made someone redo a whole presentation because the blue was wrong." That's a simplification of a complex." "Can I stay at Emma's?" He almost said, "Is that all you're worried about?" But he knew the answer, and the answer was yes. And he loved her fiercely for it. A trampoline and a best friend were all she needed the world to be right now. He hoped that lasted as long as possible. "I'll call Emma's mom," he said. "Yes." She pumped her fist and disappeared back down the hall. Connor put the pasta on, pulled out his phone, and called Mrs. Patterson. Then he opened his laptop and sat down at the kitchen table while dinner cooked, and he pulled up every Hartwell file he had, because if he was going to be in a room with Lauren Sterling for 24 hours, the only armor he had was knowing this material better than anyone else alive. He worked until midnight. He hadn't done that in years. It felt disturbingly a little bit like being alive. He was outside 7 minutes early. He always was. It was the thing about being a single parent. You stopped being fashionably late around the time your child's daycare started charging by the minute for pickup. Punctuality wasn't a virtue anymore. It was survival. The morning was cold and still the kind of dark that's just starting to thin at the edges. He had his carry-on, his laptop bag, and an accordion folder thick with 3 weeks of research that he had done entirely on his own time after hours because the Hartwell brief had bothered him in a way he couldn't explain, and he'd had to scratch the itch. Nobody had asked him to do it. Nobody had known he was doing it. He thought about that now, standing on the sidewalk, with his breath fogging in the cold. How many hours had he put into research that was never supposed to matter? How many late nights after Lily was asleep, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop and a cold cup of coffee, pulling apart brand language that no one was ever going to ask him about? The car came at 5:43. He got in, gave his name, settled the folder on his lap. 2 blocks later, the car stopped again. The door opened, and Lauren Sterling sat down beside him. She was perfectly put together at 5:43 in the morning, charcoal blazer, leather portfolio, the particular composure of a woman who did not allow mourning to be a disadvantage. She glanced at him once the way you glance at the seat number to confirm you're in the right row. "Hayes," she said. "Ms. Sterling." He kept his voice even. He had practiced keeping his voice even. Her eyes dropped to the accordion folder. "That's the Hartwell research. Yes, I organized it into 4 sections: brand voice analysis, competitive landscape audience segmentation, and what I'm calling a gap map of where the current campaign language is. We'll go through it on the plane." She opened her portfolio and started reading something he couldn't see. Connor turned to the window. "Don't try to be impressive," Marcus had told him. "She can smell it." He watched the city slide past in the pre-dawn gray and told himself he was not trying to be impressive. He was trying to survive the next 24 hours without embarrassing himself or his agency or his daughter, who was currently asleep on a trampoline at Emma's house and deserved a father who could hold it together. He could hold it together. He was holding it together. "Your research flagged a problem," Lauren said without looking up. He turned. "Which one?" "All of them." She still wasn't looking at him. "You found 4 critical gaps in the Hartwell campaign language that Denise's team missed entirely. I'm looking at your notes right now." He hadn't realized she'd already opened the folder. "I wasn't—" He stopped. Restarted. "I wasn't trying to undermine Denise's work. I just noticed, I know what you were doing." Now she looked up, direct measured unreadable. "I'm asking you why you didn't say anything. You've had these notes for 3 weeks." The question landed somewhere tender. He felt it. "I'm a copywriter," he said. "The strategy isn't my lane." "That's not an answer." He held her gaze for a moment. This was the live wire Marcus had warned him about. He could feel it. "I didn't think anyone would listen," he said quietly. Something moved across her face too fast to name, gone before he could read it. She looked back down at the folder. "They'll listen tomorrow," she said. "Make sure you're ready." The car moved through the lightning city, and Connor Hayes sat very still, feeling the ground shift slightly under everything he thought he knew about himself. The flight was an hour and 12 minutes. They had a row to themselves aisle and window with the middle seat empty, and Lauren spent the first 40 minutes working through his research folder with a focus that was almost physical. He could feel it from 2 feet away. He was reviewing his own notes when she said, still not looking up, "The Hartwell Tone Guide. Walk me through your thinking." "The brief describes the brand as authoritative but approachable," he said, shifting into the material the way you shift into familiar gear. "But when I audited the actual approved copy, not the guidelines, the live copy, it's running about 60% authoritative, maybe 15% genuinely approachable, and the rest is neutral filler. It doesn't commit to either direction. And that matters because they're trying to be a trusted friend who happens to also be an expert." The words came without him planning them. But the copy keeps defaulting to expert mode the moment things get technical, and that's exactly when people most need the friend. Silence. He became aware that she had put the folder down. He looked up. She was watching him with that focused, unreadable attention, the spotlight quality, and it was different from before. It had more weight to it. "Where did that come from?" she said. "The research just—" "No." She shook her head, small and precise. "That last part. That's exactly when people most need the friend. That's not analysis. That's insight." "Where did that come from?" Connor thought about Lily's pediatrician, who was wonderful with data and terrible with eye contact. He thought about the financial advisor who had talked to him about life insurance after his wife left, using words like mortality probability matrices, while Connor had sat across from him, wondering how he was going to explain to a 4-year-old that sometimes families change shape. He thought about every moment he'd needed a human voice and gotten a technical one. "Experience," he said. She held his gaze for 1 beat. 2. "Write those exact words down," she said. "Verbatim. That's how we open the pitch." She handed him back the folder and returned to her portfolio. Connor uncapped his pen. His hand was almost steady. "Trusted friend, who happens to also be an expert. Drops the friend exactly when you need them most." He stared at what he'd written and felt something move in his chest. Careful, cautious, like a limb that had been asleep so long it had forgotten it was still there. They landed, cleared the terminal, got into a car. Lauren worked on her phone. Connor reviewed notes. The efficiency of it was almost comfortable, like two people who had figured out their rhythm. He was reading his own handwriting when she said quietly, "You're good at this." He looked up. At what? Staying out of the way of your own thinking. She didn't look up from her phone. Most people edit themselves before the idea is finished. You don't. He didn't know what to say to that. He said, "Thank you." She didn't respond. He looked back at his notes. But something had changed in the temperature of the car, and he couldn't have explained what or why. The hotel lobby was clean, business, functional, beige and gray. Lauren went to the desk. Connor stood with the bags checking a text from Lily. "Emma's mom is making waffles tomorrow." "Can I have waffles?" Smiling at his phone when he heard it. Not words, the quality of a pause. He looked up. Lauren was standing at the front desk, and she was very still in a way she hadn't been still before. The desk clerk, young, visibly sorry about something, was talking with the careful enunciation of someone delivering news they'd rather not deliver. Connor walked closer. "A conference block that overran, and with the tech summit this week." "How many rooms?" Lauren said. "One, Ms. Sterling. We have one room remaining under the Meridian reservation. It does have 2 queen beds, and other hotels in the area. I've called 6, ma'am. The summit has..." "How far is the nearest available room?" 22 minutes. There's a motel." "What kind of motel?" The clerk's hesitation answered before his words did. Lauren set her card on the counter. Her voice didn't change register. Her expression didn't either. "The room," she said. 2 queen beds. 2 workstations." She turned to Connor. He had heard everything. He was holding his accordion folder and keeping his face in the exact neutral expression it needed to be, in which was taking everything he had. "Professional arrangement," she said. "This changes nothing about why we're here." "Of course," Connor said. "Completely understood." She looked at him for 1 second longer than necessary. "Good." She took the key folders, handed him one, walked to the elevator. He followed. The elevator doors closed on the 2 of them, the lobby disappearing behind polished metal. And the silence in that small space was the most specific silence Connor had ever stood inside. He looked at the numbers. She looked at her phone. Floor 5. The number climbed. Connor thought about the last time he'd shared a room with another adult. He thought about how long ago that was. He thought about his daughter eating waffles tomorrow morning without him, and about Lauren Sterling's voice saying, "I didn't think anyone would listen," back at him like a mirror, and about how in the last 14 hours he had said more things that mattered than he'd said in the last 6 months. The elevator opened. They walked down the hall. She slid the keycard. The door swung inward. 2 beds, a desk, a window. Ordinary, clean, impersonal. Lauren set her portfolio on the desk by the window without discussion and opened her laptop. "Order lunch," she said. "No utensils. We're not stopping more than 10 minutes. And Connor," she didn't look up, "pull out everything you have on the voice section. That's where we're starting." "The voice section," he repeated. "That's the section I built." "I know." Now she looked up. "That's why we're starting there." He set down his bag, sat on the edge of his bed, reached for the room service menu. Outside the window, Milwaukee ran its ordinary Tuesday. Inside this room, something was beginning, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of a door that once opened cannot be shut again. Connor Hayes, invisible, careful, small, not for much longer. He picked up the phone, ordered sandwiches, and then he opened his folder to the section with his name on it, and he got to work. The sandwiches arrived in 12 minutes. Lauren didn't look up when the knock came. Connor opened the door, tipped the attendant, a habit he'd never broken, the thing his mother had drilled into him. Always tip the person who brings you food, and set the tray on the corner of the desk without disturbing her workspace. She noticed. He didn't know how he knew she noticed. She didn't say anything, didn't even glance over, but something in her posture acknowledged it, the smallest fraction of a shift, like a person who expected to have to ask and didn't have to. "Turkey or ham?" he said. "Either." He put the turkey in front of her, took the ham for himself, sat at the small side table with his laptop open and his folder spread out and half a sandwich in his hand, and for a few minutes the only sounds in the room were keyboard clicks and the muffled noise of the city outside. Then Lauren said without preamble, "Tell me what you think is wrong with the current deck." Connor swallowed, set down the sandwich. "The current deck or the one Denise built? They're the same deck." "Right." He pulled up the file. "Okay. Slide 4, the brand promise section. It opens with a statistic. 43% of consumers report higher trust in brands that use plain language. That's a good stat, but it's the wrong opening." "Why?" "Because Hartwell's clients aren't consumers. They're mid-level procurement managers at regional healthcare companies. They don't make emotional decisions. They make defensible ones. So opening with a trust statistic doesn't speak to them, it speaks to a marketing director. You need to open with ROI language, and then you can earn the emotional argument by slide 6. Silence. Lauren had stopped typing. "Denise has been on this account for 8 months, she said slowly. "I know. And she missed that." "I don't think she missed it. I think she knew her audience was Lauren Sterling, not the Hartwell client. The deck was built to impress internally." He stopped. The sentence had come out faster than he intended, and it was the kind of observation that could go very badly in about 4 different directions. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that." "No." Lauren's voice was unreadable. "Say it again." He looked at her. The deck was optimized to get approved, not to get results. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to her screen, and her fingers hit the keyboard with a different energy, faster, more deliberate. "Pull up slide 4, she said. "We're rewriting the opening." He pulled it up, and they started to work. What happened in the next 2 hours was something Connor didn't have a name for. Not at first. It wasn't collaboration exactly. Lauren was too precise and too fast for it to feel like equal ground. But it wasn't dictation either. She would throw out a direction, and he would catch it, shape it, hand it back. Changed, and she would look at what he'd returned, and either use it immediately or push harder. "Too formal," she said of his first draft of the opening line. He rewrote it. "Too casual now." He rewrote it again. "Close. What if you move the healthcare reference earlier? Like this." He read it aloud. She said nothing for 3 seconds, the specific silence of someone turning an idea over, and then, "Yes, exactly like that. Keep going. Keep going." 2 words. He replayed them longer than was probably reasonable. Around the 3rd hour, Lauren pushed back from the desk and rolled her shoulders. It was such a human gesture, so unexpectedly ordinary, that Connor found himself looking away quickly like he'd seen something private. "The voice section," she said. "Your section. Talk me through it." "My section is really more of a framework than a script," he said. "I built it as a set of principles that the presenter can adapt in real time rather than just reading slides. The idea is, if the presenter sounds like they believe the brand rather than just describing it, the clients feel the difference." "And you think our presenter can do that?" "Depends on the presenter." She looked at him. "It's going to be you." The room went very quiet. Connor heard the sentence, processed the words individually, felt the floor move under him. "I'm the copywriter," he said carefully. "I'm here to support the—" Denise was the presenter. "Denise is in a hospital right now having emergency surgery." Lauren's voice was even. Not unkind, just factual the way a doctor is factual when there's no time for soft delivery. "I will lead the opening, the financials, the strategic overview. But the voice section, the brand language, the campaign philosophy, that needs to come from whoever built it. Because you were right this morning. The best way to make clients feel the brand is to have someone who believes it talk about it. I wrote those words about someone else's presentation skills." "I know." Something almost like a smile, not quite just the shadow of the shape of one. "Ironic, isn't it? Ms. Sterling." "Lauren." She said it quietly without making a production of it. "We're in a hotel room in Milwaukee. You can call me Lauren. That landed differently than he expected. He sat with it for a second. Lauren, he said, I haven't presented to a client in 4 years. I'm a back room guy. I write the language other people stand up and deliver. I know what you do, Connor. The use of his first name was deliberate. He could feel it the way she was leveling something, closing a distance with intention. I've read your work, not just the Hartwell research. Your copy on the Kelsey account, the Drummond rebrand, the 3 pitches you ghost wrote for Marcus that he presented as his own. The air went out of him. You knew about that. I know everything that comes out of my agency. No accusation in it, just fact. Marcus is a good account manager. He's not a writer, you are. She paused. The question is whether you can be both in the same room at the same time. Connor looked at his hands on the keyboard. He thought about every time he'd sat in the back of a room and watched someone else stand up and say the things he'd written. Every time a client had praised the campaign language and shook the wrong hand. Every time he'd told himself it didn't matter because the work got done and Lily's school was good and the lights stayed on. I don't know if I can, he said honestly. That, Lauren said, is the most useful thing you've said all day. She turned back to her screen. Which means tomorrow you're going to find out. She said it the way you say the meeting is at 9 or the car arrives at 6. Like it was already decided. Like his fear was a logistical detail she'd already accounted for and moved past. He picked up his pen. And he went back to work. By 7 in the evening, they had rebuilt the first 2/3 of the deck. Connor's voice section was restructured into 6 talking points, each anchored to a specific client pain point, each written in the language he'd identified as the gap, the friend, not just the expert. Lauren had read through all 6 without comment, and then she had looked up and said, "These are good." And the specificity of her praise, not great, not excellent, just good. From Lauren Sterling, hit him somewhere in the chest, harder than a compliment had hit him in years. Then the laptop crashed. Not a freeze, not a slow spiral. A full, sudden, catastrophic black screen. Lauren's hand went still on the keyboard. The room went completely quiet. No, she said. Flat. Quiet. The word of someone who does not have room in this moment for this problem. She pressed the power button. Nothing. Pressed it again. Nothing. Connor was across the room in 4 steps. When did you last save? Autosave. Every 10 minutes. Okay. He pulled up his own laptop. I have the voice section. I have the brand analysis. I have the competitive slides. What was on your machine that isn't on mine? The financial projections. The implementation timeline. The client ROI model. She was already on her phone calling the agency's IT line and then closing her eyes when it went to after-hours voicemail. She looked at her watch. It was 7:18 p.m. The pitch is at 9 tomorrow, she said. I know. I have everything backed up on the agency server, but remote access from this machine requires the VPN client, Connor said. I have it. I installed it last week because I was working on the Drummond files from home. He was already typing. Tell me your server credentials. She looked at him for exactly 1 second, that measuring look, that spotlight quality, and then she read him her credentials from memory. He logged in. The connection spun. 30 seconds that felt like 3 minutes. It connected. You're in, he said. Tell me what to download first. ROI model. It's in the Hartwell folder Q3 projections subfolder. He found it, started the download, looked up. Lauren was standing behind him now, close enough that he was aware of her presence in the particular way you're aware of the only other source of warmth in a cold room. The timeline file, she said, leaning slightly forward to point at the screen. That one, and the client comparables beneath it. Got it. He opened them, checked the data was intact, and exhaled. It's all here. She was quiet for a moment. He could feel the tension leaving her, not dramatically, not all at once, but in the careful, measured way of someone who has trained themselves not to show relief any more than they show panic. Good, she said. One word. But the weight behind it was different. She pulled the side chair up next to him and sat down, and for the next hour and a half, they worked from the same screen, his laptop, their shared disaster rebuilt piece by piece, their conversation stripped down to pure function. Move that figure to the left column, change the font on the header. Does this number still sync with the Q2 data? No more careful professional distance. Just the work immediate and demanding, and two people in a hotel room who had to solve it before morning. At one point, Lauren reached past him to scroll the trackpad, and his coffee cup was in the way, and she moved it without hesitation, just reached around him and shifted it aside, and neither of them said anything about it. He noticed his heart rate. He told himself it was the caffeine. By 9:30, the deck was rebuilt. All 41 slides. Better than before, Lauren said, which Connor privately thought was a generous reading, but didn't argue. She sat back, looked at the ceiling for a moment. "Order dinner," she said. "Something real this time. We've earned it." "Any preferences?" "Something that's actually from Milwaukee." He pulled out his phone, spent 3 minutes researching like his professional credibility depended on it, and ordered from a place that had been open since 1987 and was described in every review as the kind of place that doesn't need to advertise. Lauren raised an eyebrow when he told her the name. "How did you find that?" "I read a lot," he said. "Occupational hazard." The food came 40 minutes later. They ate at the small side table, not at their workstations, actually at the table like two people having a meal. Lauren ate without ceremony or performance, which he appreciated. Lily did the same thing, the complete absence of fussiness around food, and he'd always thought it was a mark of a person who had too many real things to care about to be precious about dinner. "Your daughter," Lauren said. "Lily, she's 9. He looked up. "Yeah, how did you know her name?" "Your emergency contact form." She held up a hand before he could speak. "I read everyone's. It's my agency. I like to know who I'm asking to be away from their families." He sat with that for a second. "She's at her friend Emma's. They're making waffles tomorrow." "Good." She said it simply without performance. "Is she okay with you traveling?" She was mostly excited about the trampoline. Lauren's mouth curved. Small, brief, but genuine. The first real smile he'd seen from her, not the shadow of one, the actual thing, and it changed her face entirely. Made her look younger, softer, and somehow more formidable at the same time. "Smart kid," she said. "Takes after her mom," he said. The words were out before he caught them. He looked down at his food. Lauren didn't push, didn't press, didn't do what most people did, which was either pivot awkwardly or ask the question he could see forming behind their eyes. She just let it sit there, respected the space around it, and moved on. "The voice section," she said. "Tonight before you sleep, read it out loud, all 6 points." He looked up. "By myself." "Yes. You need to hear how it sounds in your own voice, not how it reads on a page." She picked up her fork. "Actors call it table work. You need to know it's yours before you can make someone else believe it." "I'm not an actor." "No," she agreed. "You're better. Actors pretend to believe things. You actually do." She met his eyes across the table. "That's rarer than you think." The sentence dropped into him and stayed. He finished his dinner, washed up, sat on the edge of his bed with his printed notes, and read all 6 talking points out loud, quietly into the darkened room, while Lauren worked silently at the desk. His voice felt strange to him at first, too quiet, too hesitant. But by the 3rd point, something shifted. The words were his. He'd written them. They fit his mouth in a way that other people's words never quite did. He finished the 6th point and looked up. Lauren didn't look away from her screen, but she said quietly, "Again, faster this time." He read them again, faster, more certain. "Again." He read them a 3rd time. This time he barely looked at the paper. "Good," she said. And that was all. He set down the notes, turned off his lamp, lay back in the dark with the ceiling above him and the quiet sounds of Lauren working at the desk keyboard, clicks the soft movement of pages, and he thought about a question she'd asked him on the plane. Why didn't you say anything? You've had these notes for 3 weeks. He hadn't had an answer then. He had something closer to one now. He hadn't said anything because saying something meant being seen, and being seen meant being measured. And being measured meant discovering definitively, officially, without ambiguity, that you weren't enough. That the smallness was real and permanent, and not just a temporary condition of circumstance. He'd been protecting himself from a verdict. He closed his eyes. In 9 hours, he was going to stand up in front of Hartwell's clients and deliver 6 talking points about brand voice and authentic communication. He was going to be seen. And the most frightening part, the part that kept him awake for another 20 minutes while the city hummed outside and Lauren's keyboard clicked steadily in the dark, was that he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to hide anymore. He was up before the alarm. That almost never happened anymore. Since Lily was born, he'd lived by alarms. Phone alarms, backup alarms, the mental alarm that fired somewhere in his brainstem whenever a child-related deadline was approaching. But this morning, his eyes opened at 5:47, 13 minutes before his phone was set to go off, and he lay still for a moment in the unfamiliar dark, listening to the sound of Lauren's even breathing from across the room. She was still asleep. That surprised him. He'd assumed she was the kind of person who woke at 4 and did 40 minutes of something disciplined before the rest of the world existed. He got up quietly, showered without turning on the bathroom exhaust fan because the noise seemed wrong in the silence, got dressed in the dark, made coffee with the small in-room machine using only the light from his phone screen, set a cup on Lauren's side of the desk without waking her. Then he sat at the table and read his 6 talking points one more time, not out loud, just his eyes moving over the words, letting them settle. His handwriting on the printed page, his syntax, his argument, the one Lauren had called insight on the plane, the one that had come from every doctor who'd been too clinical, and every advisor who'd been too technical, and every moment he'd needed a human voice and gotten a process instead. He knew this material. He'd lived it before he'd written it. That was the difference, and he understood that now in a way he hadn't 24 hours ago. He was on his 3rd read-through when Lauren said from across the room, "What time is it?" 6:12? He said without looking up. "Coffee's on your desk." A pause. The sound of her sitting up. "You made coffee?" Machine was right there. Another pause, different in quality. "Thank you, Connor." He looked up then. She was sitting on the edge of her bed with her hair down the first time he'd seen it that way, holding the coffee cup in both hands. She looked for approximately 4 seconds like a completely different person. Not the CEO, not the live wire, just a woman in a hotel room holding a cup of coffee someone had made for her. Then she blinked and the composure came back smooth and practiced as a tide coming in. "How are you feeling about today?" she said. Honest answer. Always. "Terrified," he said. "But I know the material." She nodded once. "That's the right answer. If you weren't scared, I'd be worried." She took a sip of coffee. "The clients arrive at 9. We're in the conference room at 8:30 to set up. That gives us 20 minutes right now." She stood. "Read me point 3. Right now." Right now. He looked at his notes, looked up at her, and he read point 3, the one about the moment a brand loses its humanity by reaching for authority out loud in a hotel room to Lauren Sterling, who was standing in front of him with her coffee and her hair down and her absolute total attention. When he finished, she said, "Slower on the last sentence. Let it breathe." He read it again, slower. "Better," she said. "Now you're in the room with them instead of running through it." She took another sip. "Get dressed. We leave in 15. He looked down at himself. He was already fully dressed. She caught it and something flickered across her face. Something between appreciation and amusement, and she turned toward the bathroom without comment. He exhaled, picked up his notes, read point 4. He was going to be fine. He almost believed it. The elevator ride down was quiet in a completely different way than it had been the night before. The previous night's silence had been careful managed, 2 people maintaining professional distance in an awkward situation. This silence was something else, the silence of two people who had been through something together and didn't need to narrate it. He noticed the difference and filed it somewhere he couldn't quite name. The conference room was on the second floor. Lauren moved through the setup projector screen laptop connection, the small arrangement of materials at each seat with the efficiency of someone who had done this 100 times. Connor set out printed backup copies of the deck, one per seat, because Lauren had said last night that clients over 45 always liked something physical to hold, and he'd gone to the business center at 11 p.m. and printed them himself. She noticed the copies already placed when she turned around from the projector. She looked at them, looked at him. "Business center closes at 10, she said. "I asked them to stay open." "You asked a business center employee to stay open past closing time." "I tipped him $20 and explained the situation. He was very understanding." She looked at him for 1 beat 2 3, that measuring look that he was starting to be able to read. This one meant something like, "I didn't know that about you, and I'm adjusting my calculations accordingly." "Good instinct," she said, and turned back to the projector. He let out a breath so quietly it barely existed. They ran through the first 12 slides together, Lauren's section, the strategic overview and financials. She was extraordinary at it. No notes, no hesitation, the kind of fluency that only comes from believing completely in what you're saying. He watched her and thought about his 6 points and told himself he could do this. He thought about Lily's text that morning, "Waffles were amazing, miss you, Daddy," and something steadied in him. Lily thought he was capable of things before he proved them. Maybe Lauren did too. Maybe he could borrow that certainty for the next hour. At 8:52, the door opened. Not at 9. 8:52. The Hartwell clients were early. 3 of them, Gerald Marsh, FivP of Operations, who Connor recognized from the research photos, a woman he didn't recognize in a gray suit, and a younger man with a laptop bag who looked like he hadn't slept. Gerald Marsh was the decision-maker. Everything Connor had read about him indicated a man who respected directness, distrusted charm, and made up his mind in the first 8 minutes of any meeting. Connor checked his watch. 8:53. Lauren turned from the screen and extended her hand to Gerald Marsh, with a smile that was warm and measured in exactly the right proportion. "Gerald, thank you for coming. I hope the drive wasn't difficult." "We came last night," Marsh said. No pleasantries. Already scanning the room, already evaluating. His eyes landed on Connor with a brief, assessing pause. "Who's this Connor Hayes?" Lauren said. "Our lead brand voice strategist on your account." Connor shook Marsh's hand and did not let himself react to the title Lauren had just given him. A title he did not have never had, and was being handed in real time by a woman who had decided he needed it before the clients decided he didn't. "Brand voice strategist," Marsh repeated, looking at Connor directly. "You wrote the campaign language." "The framework, yes," Connor said. "The philosophy behind how the brand communicates and the principles your team can use to stay consistent across every touchpoint." Marsh's eyes didn't move from his face. "In plain language, what does that mean?" Connor didn't look at Lauren. He didn't need to. "It means we figured out the moment your brand loses people," he said. "And we built a system to make sure that moment never comes." Marsh was quiet for 1 second. 2. Then, "Sit down. Show me." That was the mini climax Connor didn't see coming. Not a disaster, but a sudden acceleration. The buffer of 7 minutes he'd expected before the pitch began had collapsed entirely. There was no transition, no warm-up. He was in it. Lauren moved to the front of the room smoothly, no sign of adjustment. She opened with the strategic overview, and Connor sat at the side table with his printed notes face down in front of him. Face down because he'd decided in the elevator that looking at them during the pitch would make him look uncertain, and he couldn't afford uncertain, and he listened to Lauren work the room. She was good. She was genuinely, technically, masterfully good. She moved through the financials and the competitive analysis without a single stumble, answering Marsh's interjections with the calm precision of someone who had anticipated them. The woman in the gray suit, who turned out to be their legal and compliance director, a detail that mattered enormously for a healthcare-adjacent brand, asked 3 questions in quick succession about regulatory language compliance, and Lauren answered all 3 without flinching. 22 minutes in, Lauren said, "The section I want you to pay particular attention to is what we're calling the voice framework. This is the work that will determine whether your clients trust you or just use you." Connor. He stood up. His notes were still face down on the table. Marsh was looking at him. So was Legal. So was the younger man with the laptop, who Connor had decided was probably Marsh's deputy, and was almost certainly the one who would have to actually implement whatever they approved today. Connor thought about a sentence he'd written at midnight in a hotel room. The moment you most need the friend, the brand becomes the expert. He thought about the pediatrician. He thought about the financial advisor speaking about mortality, probability matrices to a man who just needed someone to tell him it was going to be okay. He thought about every invisible person who had the right answer and never got to give it. He opened his mouth. "Here's the problem," he said. "Your clients come to you when they're scared, not curious scared. They're a regional hospital administrator and something went wrong, or something might go wrong, and they need a vendor who makes them feel less alone in that moment, not more technically impressive." He paused. "Your current communication does the opposite. It leads with your expertise, every time, without exception. And your clients hear that as we're very good and you should be grateful we're here. They need to hear we understand what you're facing and we've been here before." Marsh's eyes hadn't moved. "The difference," Connor continued, "isn't just tone, it's architecture. It's where in the conversation you put the credentials versus where you put the empathy. Right now, you lead with credentials and hope empathy is implied. We're proposing you lead with empathy and let the credentials be proven by everything that follows." He walked to the screen, pulled up the first slide of the voice framework, his slide, and walked them through it. Not reading. Talking. The way you talk about something you understand in your body, not just your brain. The room was completely still. After point 2, Marsh held up a hand. Connor stopped. "Give me an example," Marsh said. "Specific. Real language." Connor nodded. He'd prepared for this. He pulled up the side-by-side comparison he'd built the night before the existing Hartwell copy next to his revision, and he read both versions aloud. The original was technically accurate, clinically precise, entirely bloodless. His revision carried the same information and language that felt like a person had written it for another person. When he finished the woman in the gray suit, Legal said quietly, "The second version is better." Marsh looked at her, back at Connor. "How long to implement this across our existing materials?" he said. Connor looked at Lauren. She gave him a look that was almost imperceptible. "You have the answer? Say it," and he turned back. 6 weeks for the priority tier, your 3 highest volume client touchpoints. Full implementation across all channels, 12 weeks. He paused. The framework itself takes about 4 hours to train your internal team. After that, they can apply it without coming back to us for every piece of copy. Marsh's deputy, the young man with the laptop, leaned forward for the first time. "You'd teach our internal team? You'd give them the framework?" "Yes," Connor said. "Why would you do that? That's the part you'd normally charge for ongoing. Because if your team can sustain it without us, you will. And if you will, your clients will feel it. And if your clients feel it, they stay." He met the young man's eyes. "That's the long game. We'd rather be the agency that taught you something that worked than the agency you still need because we kept something back." Silence. Marsh looked at Lauren. "Is that the official position of Meridian Creative?" Lauren looked at Connor, and in that look was something he'd work out later. Something that was not just professional approval, but something quieter and more personal than that. Something that said, "I see you," in a way that had nothing to do with the pitch. "It is now," she said. Marsh turned back to Connor. "Keep going." Connor went through points, 4, 5, and 6. He didn't look at his notes once. He talked about brand voice the way he thought about it at midnight when Lily was asleep and the kitchen was quiet, and words were the only thing he had that was entirely his, with the specificity of someone who believed in language as a tool that could close the distance between a company and a human being who needed something. When he finished, the room held its quiet for 3 full seconds. Then Marsh said, "I want this, not the agency, this. I want the person who built this framework to be the point of contact on our account." Connor felt the sentence hit him like cold water. "I'm a copywriter," he said before he could stop himself. Marsh looked at him flatly. "Not anymore, you're not." He looked at Lauren. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't fully decode, something between pride and something softer, something almost like recognition. Like she was looking at a person who had just become someone they hadn't known they were. He looked back at Marsh. His hands were completely steady. "I'd be honored," he said. After Marsh and his team stepped into the hall for a break, a good sign Lauren had told him they break when they're buying, she crossed the room to where Connor was standing and stopped in front of him. She didn't say "I told you so." She didn't say "well done" in the performance way. She looked at him for a moment and said quietly and completely directly, "You just changed your career. Do you understand that?" He exhaled. "I'm starting to." "The person in that room just now," she said, "the one who talked about the long game instead of the billing cycle. That person has been sitting in the back of your office for 2 years writing copy for people who don't understand it as well as you do." She paused. "I need you to be angry about that." He blinked. "Angry, not at anyone, just enough that you don't go back." Her voice was still quiet, but there was something underneath it. Something with weight. Something that felt like it came from a place she knew well. "The worst thing that can happen now is that you walk out of this room, get on the plane, go home, make Lily's lunch tomorrow morning, and decide this was a fluke." The accuracy of that landed somewhere it wasn't supposed to. He felt his jaw tighten. "It wasn't a fluke," he said. "No," she said. "It wasn't." The door opened. Marsh leaned back in. "Ms. Sterling, we'd like to move forward. Full implementation your proposed timeline." He looked at Connor. "And I want Hayes on the account. Primary contact. Non-negotiable." Lauren looked at Marsh. "Agreed." Marsh nodded and withdrew. The door closed. Connor stood in the quiet of the empty conference room, with the projector still running, and his notes still face down on the side table where he'd left them 2 hours ago. He hadn't touched them once. He picked them up now, looked at the 6 talking points in his own handwriting. His words, his argument, his. He thought about Lily eating waffles at Emma's house, completely unbothered, completely trusting that her father was somewhere being capable. She'd never doubted it. She'd woken up that morning and had waffles and sent him a heart and a pancake emoji, and that was the full extent of her concern. He folded the notes, put them in his jacket pocket. They were staying there. He was keeping them. Lauren was already packing up the materials, efficient, unhurried, the crisis resolved and filed, and already being processed into the next thing. But when he reached past her to unplug his laptop, she stopped what she was doing for just a moment. "Connor," she said. He looked at her. "Good work." 2 words, the same 2 words she could have said about a decent rough draft or a well-organized folder. But the way she said them, with the weight of everything they'd both just witnessed, made them mean something else entirely. "Thank you," he said, "for not telling me I could do it." She tilted her head, slightly questioning. "You could have told me I'd be great. Lots of people do that. It doesn't help." He picked up his laptop bag. "You just told me to find out. That was better." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said something he didn't expect in a voice that was quieter than he'd heard from her yet. "Someone did that for me once, a long time ago." She picked up her portfolio. "I try to pass it on." She walked to the door. He stood there for a second longer in the empty room with his notes in his pocket and the projector humming and the particular silence of a space where something had just permanently changed. Then he followed her out. The flight home was quieter than the one out. Not uncomfortable, just different. The kind of quiet that settles between 2 people after something significant has happened, and neither of them needs to fill it with noise. Connor had the window seat again. Lauren had the aisle. The middle seat was empty again. But this time, about 40 minutes in, Lauren set her portfolio down on the empty seat between them and said without looking up from her phone, "You should know that Marsh sent a follow-up email before we even landed." Connor turned from the window. "Already. He wants to schedule the kickoff for next Thursday." She set her phone face down on the portfolio. He also CC'd his COO. He didn't CC his COO on the original RFP. Connor understood what that meant. A COO on a CC line meant the decision had moved up, that Marsh had gone back in from that hallway break and told someone above him that this was worth more attention than originally allocated. It meant the account had grown before the ink was dry. "That's good," he said carefully. "That's very good." She finally looked at him. "It's also a larger scope than what we quoted, which means I'm going to have to restructure the engagement parameters before Thursday. Do you need—" He stopped, recalibrated. "What do you need from me before Thursday?" She looked at him for a moment, like she was noting the adjustment the way he'd caught himself mid-offer, and reframed it as her call. "I need the voice framework documented as a proper methodology, not notes. A formal document with implementation guidelines, training protocols, and measurement criteria. By Thursday. By Wednesday morning. I need a day to review before the kickoff." He did the math in his head. 4 days. Full methodology document. He had the framework in his head and in his handwritten notes, and in the bones of the 6 talking points he still had folded in his jacket pocket. He could do it. "Done," he said. She nodded, picked up her portfolio, went back to work. Connor turned back to the window and looked at the clouds below them, and thought about Wednesday morning and Thursday's kickoff and his kitchen table at midnight and Lily asleep down the hall, and whether any of this was actually real or whether he was going to land and find the whole thing had been a very specific, professionally detailed dream. His phone buzzed. "Lily, Daddy, when are you coming home? Emma's cat scratched me. I'm okay, but wanted to tell you." He typed back immediately. "Landing soon. Does it hurt? Did you clean it?" 3 seconds. "Emma's mom cleaned it. It only hurts a little. Also, I named the cat Gerald." He stared at the screen. "Of all the names. Gerald." He laughed quietly to himself, just a breath through his nose, and Lauren said without looking up, "Good news. My daughter named a cat Gerald." A pause. "Gerald Marsh is going to love that story." He looked at her. She was still looking at her portfolio, but the corner of her mouth was doing the thing it did not quite a smile, just the architecture of one. He turned back to the window, still smiling. He had no idea, sitting there at 30,000 feet with the voice framework in his pocket and Gerald the cat in his texts, that the hardest part wasn't behind him. It was waiting at the office. The agency felt different when he walked in the next morning. Or maybe he was different and the agency felt the same. He couldn't be sure. He knew objectively that nothing had changed in the 48 hours he'd been gone. The open plan desks were the same. The coffee machine made the same sound. Marcus was in the same position he was always in, leaning against the kitchen counter, scrolling his phone with the focused expression of a man professionally avoiding work. But the way people looked at him was different. Not dramatically, not obviously. Just the small adjustments. The second glance, the slightly longer eye contact, the way 2 junior copywriters, who had never initiated conversation with him, stopped to say good morning in the hallway with what felt like genuine curiosity rather than reflexive politeness. Word had gotten out. In agencies, it always did the way weather did, not announced, just suddenly present. Marcus found him at his desk at 9:15. "Marsh account," Marcus said without sitting down. "Full implementation, 37,000 over the initial quote. Lauren told me on the plane." Marcus looked at him. "She told you on the plane?" "Yes." Another look. "She doesn't usually share financials with—" He stopped himself. Started again. "Marsh's COO called Lauren directly this morning, before 9. He wants to discuss expanding the engagement to their subsidiary brands." Connor looked up from his laptop. "How many subsidiaries?" 4, across 3 states. Marcus was doing the thing where his expression was working very hard to stay neutral. That's not a campaign haze. That's a retainer relationship. Connor understood. He understood it the way you understand something that is much larger than the thing you thought you were doing, like reaching for a door handle and finding the door opens onto a much bigger room than you expected. "Okay," he said. "Okay." Marcus repeated it. "That's all you've got. Okay." "What do you want me to say, Marcus?" "I want you to..." He exhaled. "I've been presenting your work for 2 years, Connor. I want you to know that I know that and I'm sorry, and I think what you did in Milwaukee was..." "Marcus." Connor kept his voice easy. "It's fine." "It's not fine. I took credit for..." "You were my manager. It wasn't unusual. I didn't push back." He looked at Marcus steadily. "We can have a longer conversation about it another time if you want. Right now, I have a methodology document due Wednesday morning." Marcus stood there for a moment, with the expression of a man who had been braced for a confrontation and found himself holding his own argument with nothing to push against. He straightened up. "Right. Yeah." He paused at the edge of the desk. "For what it's worth, Lauren knew. She always knew it was yours." Connor looked at his screen. "I know," he said quietly. Marcus left. Connor stared at the blank document open on his laptop. Hartwell Voice Framework Implementation Methodology. He put his fingers on the keys, and then he reached into his jacket pocket. He was still wearing the same jacket from Milwaukee, hadn't thought to change it, and pulled out the folded notes. 6 talking points, handwritten slightly creased from 2 days in his pocket. He smoothed them on the desk beside his keyboard. He started writing. He wrote for 6 hours with 1 break for coffee and 1 for a call from Lily's school that turned out to be nothing, a scheduling question about an upcoming field trip, but that had his heart in his throat for the 30 seconds between seeing the school's number and hearing the administrative assistant's calm voice. That was the permanent condition of single parenthood. Every call from the school was a potential emergency until proven otherwise. He was back at his keyboard within 4 minutes. At 3 in the afternoon, Lauren's assistant, a young woman named Priya, who had the particular competence of someone who kept an entire executive floor functional without anyone noticing, appeared at his desk with a calendar invite on her tablet. "Ms. Sterling would like you in the Thursday kickoff as co-presenter," Priya said. "She also wants to know if you need a formal title change processed before then, or if you're comfortable presenting under your current title for the kickoff and formalizing after." Connor looked at the tablet, at the meeting invite, at the word co-presenter next to Lauren Sterling's name. He thought about standing in the back of rooms for 2 years, about writing words that other people said out loud, about the specific, practiced smallness of a man who had decided the safest place was the one no one was looking at. "Tell her I'd like the title change processed before Thursday," he said. Priya smiled, brief, professional, warm. "She said you'd say that." She tapped the screen. "You're officially Senior Brand Strategist as of this morning. The paperwork is already filed." She turned and walked back toward the elevator. Connor sat very still. The title was already filed, before he'd given his answer. Lauren had known what he'd choose before he chose it. She'd processed the paperwork this morning, before 9, before Marcus's conversation, before the COO's call, quietly without fanfare, without making it a moment he had to perform gratitude for. She'd just done it. The way she'd just put his name on the Hartwell pitch, the way she'd just handed him a title in front of Marsh that he hadn't earned on paper but had already earned everywhere that mattered. He turned back to his screen and kept writing. By Wednesday morning, the document was 42 pages. He sent it at 6:47 a.m. before Lily was up from the kitchen table with the same cold coffee and the same quiet house. He sent it and sat back and looked at the ceiling and thought about the fact that 42 pages of structured, documented, implementable brand methodology had come out of him in 4 days, had always been in him waiting, and no one had known it was there, himself included. Lauren's reply came at 7:03, 16 minutes, strong, 2 notes pages 18 and 31. Come by at 4. He went by at 4. Her office, The actual office, the one on the executive floor with the glass wall he'd looked up at from the open plan below for 2 years, felt different to be inside than he'd imagined. It was sparse. Fewer personal items than he expected. One photograph on the bookshelf, a woman he didn't recognize, older, with Lauren's same straight-backed posture. Her mother, maybe. Or someone who had taught her something she'd carried forward. She had his document open on her screen. Page 18, she said. The measurement criteria. You've built a qualitative framework, but the metrics are soft. Marsh's COO is a numbers person. He'll want something he can put in a quarterly report. Connor pulled up his own copy on his laptop. I can add a response rate benchmark. Track language compliance against client retention data over 6 months. That works. Make it a dashboard template, something their team can fill in without interpretation. She scrolled. Page 31. The training protocol. You've designed it for their comms team, but the actual implementation is going to land with their account managers. Different audience. Different skill level. Different resistance points. He read page 31. She was right. He'd written for the people who would want the framework. He hadn't written for the people who would resent having to learn it. I'll add a resistance FAQ, he said. Preempt the objections before the training session. Good. She closed the document. The rest is excellent, Connor. He looked up. The rest of 42 pages. Yes, she said it plainly. This is the kind of document that becomes a product. Not just for Hartwell, across the agency. It's a methodology we can train internally and sell externally. A pause. I'd like your name on it, formally, as author. He felt the sentence move through him. 2 years. 2 years of his name appearing nowhere near the work he made. And now Lauren Sterling was telling him she wanted his name on a document that would carry forward through every future version of it. Through every agency training, through every client pitch that used it as a foundation. My name, he said, just to be sure he'd heard it correctly. Your name, she confirmed. This is your intellectual property, Connor, built on your time, your insight, your experience. The agency can use it, but you should be credited for its creation. She held his gaze. Non-negotiable. He thought about the 6 folded talking points still sitting on his desk. He thought about midnight and the kitchen table and the cold coffee and Lily asleep down the hall and 3 weeks of research no one had asked for. Okay, he said. Okay, she repeated, and the corner of her mouth did the thing again. Go fix pages 18 and 31. Have it back to me by 9 tomorrow. He stood to go, got to the door, turned around. Can I ask you something? She looked up. Why did you pick me for Milwaukee? Truly. There were other people who knew the Hartwell files, people with more senior titles. He paused. Why me? Lauren was quiet for a moment. And in that moment, in the 3 seconds she held before answering, he saw something cross her face that she didn't usually let cross her face. Not quite vulnerability, but the shadow of it. The place where something real lived behind the composure. Because you did the research nobody asked for, she said finally. At midnight in your own time on a campaign you had no official stake in. Do you know what that tells me? He shook his head. It tells me you care about the work more than you care about the credit. She held his gaze. That's rarer than talent. That's rarer than experience. Most people stop working the moment the assignment ends. You kept going. A pause. I needed to know what happened when someone like that was finally put in the room. He stood in her doorway and felt something unlock in his chest. Something he'd been carrying so long, he'd stopped feeling its weight, and only now, feeling it lift, understood how heavy it had been. Thank you, he said, for putting me in the room. Thank you, she said, for not wasting it. He went back to his desk, fixed pages 18 and 31, added the dashboard template and the resistance FAQ and a note on the cover page that hadn't been there before. Hartwell Voice Framework Implementation Methodology, developed by Connor Hayes, Senior Brand Strategist, Meridian Creative. He looked at his name on the page. His actual name. on the actual work. He sent it at 8:58 p.m. Lily was already asleep. The house was quiet. The coffee was cold. Everything was exactly the same as it had always been at this hour, and completely, permanently different. His phone buzzed. Not Lauren this time. It was a text from a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't open it. But the area code was local, and the message was short, so he read it. "This is Gerald Marsh. Lauren gave me your direct number. Hope that's okay. Wanted to say what you presented Thursday was the best brand thinking I've seen in 20 years of these meetings. See you next week." Connor read it twice, set his phone down, picked it up and read it again. Gerald Marsh. The man who had walked in 8 minutes early and sat down with the energy of a person who had made up his mind before the presentation started and was only there to confirm it. That Gerald Marsh had texted him directly past 9 at night to say the best brand thinking in 20 years. He set the phone down on the kitchen table next to his cold coffee and his open laptop and the folded notes that were still sitting beside his keyboard, 6 talking points in his own handwriting that had somehow improbably changed everything. He thought about what Lauren had said on the plane. The worst thing that can happen is that you go home and decide this was a fluke. He picked up a pen. At the top of his notepad, the same one he'd been using since Milwaukee, he wrote one sentence. Not for anyone else, just for himself. The kind of sentence you write when you need to see it in your own handwriting so it becomes real. This is not a fluke. This is who you are. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he capped the pen closed, the laptop, turned off the kitchen light, and went to check on Lily. She was asleep on her side with one arm hanging off the bed. Her hair spread across the pillow, that small gap between her front teeth visible even in sleep. He stood in the doorway for a moment, the way he always did this nightly ritual of checking, confirming this proof of the thing that mattered most. He pulled her arm back onto the bed. She didn't wake. He tucked the blanket up to her shoulder. "Daddy's figuring it out, Bug," he said quietly. Finally figuring it out. He turned off her lamp and went to bed. And somewhere across the city, in an office on the executive floor that was still lit at 10:15 at night, Lauren Sterling read a 42-page methodology document for the second time, not for edits, just reading, and at the bottom of the cover page below, Connor's name. She typed 4 words in the notes field that she would say to him in person later, but needed to put somewhere tonight. "I knew it was you." 3 months after Milwaukee, Connor Hayes got a call he wasn't expecting. He was at his desk, his new desk, the one Priya had quietly arranged for him on the second floor after the title change, closer to the conference rooms and the client-facing spaces, and farther from the open plan where he'd spent 2 years being invisible when his phone rang with a London number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail. He was mid-sentence in a client brief, and his coffee was still hot for once, and he had a rhythm going. He picked up. "Connor Hayes." The voice was British, direct, no wasted motion. A woman. "This is Diana Croft, creative director at Aldgate & Partners in London. You don't know me, but I know your work." He set down his pen. "How? Gerald Marsh," she said. "He's a personal friend. He sent me your voice framework document 4 weeks ago and told me it was the best brand methodology he'd encountered in 2 decades. I've spent those 4 weeks trying to find a reason to disagree with him." A pause. "I couldn't." Connor was very still. "We have a creative director position opening in January," Diana continued. "London-based, global client portfolio. I'm not posting it publicly because the person I want for it isn't the kind of person who responds to job postings." Another pause, deliberate this time. "I think you might be that person. Can we talk?" He looked at his laptop screen, at the brief he'd been writing, at the coffee going warm in his hand, at the second-floor desk he'd had for 3 months that still sometimes surprised him when he sat down at it. "Yes," he said. "We can talk." He called Lauren at 4 that afternoon. He didn't email, didn't schedule through Priya. Just called the way she'd called him that Tuesday morning that felt like it belonged to a different version of his life. She picked up on the second ring. "Diana Croft called me," he said, a beat. I know. He absorbed that. You know? She called me first, 2 weeks ago, asked if I thought you were ready. Her voice was even unhurried. I told her to call you and decide for herself. He sat with that for a moment. What did you tell her about me? I told her the truth. A pause, and in the pause he could feel her choosing the words carefully. I told her you were the kind of person who does the work nobody asks for, that you build things at midnight for their own sake, that you'd spent 2 years making other people sound smarter than they were, and still showed up every day without bitterness. Her voice was quiet but steady. I told her I'd seen you walk into a room full of people waiting for you to fail and turn it into the best 30 minutes of brand thinking I'd witnessed in 11 years of running an agency. The silence that followed was the loudest Connor had heard in months. Lauren, he said. Don't thank me, she said. Go talk to Diana. Then make a decision that's right for you and Lily. Not for Meridian, not for me, for you. A pause. That's the only thing I'll tell you to do. He hung up and sat at his second-floor desk and stared at the wall for 4 minutes without moving. London. Creative Director. Global Portfolio. A job that didn't exist yet in the shape of his life. A city 4,000 miles from Lily's school, and Mrs. Paulson and Emma's trampoline, and the kitchen table where he wrote at midnight, and the coffee he always made too much of and drank too cold. He called his mother that night after Lily was in bed, his mother who had raised 3 kids in a 2-bedroom house in Ohio and worked the early shift at a hospital for 22 years and had never once, not once, told him to play it safe. Who had said at his wife's going-away party disguised as a dinner when he'd pulled her aside and asked how he was supposed to do this alone. Connor, James Hayes, you have been capable of more than you know since the day you were born. The only question is when you're going to believe it. He told her about London, about Diana Croft, about the voice framework and Marsh and the second-floor desk and the 4 words Lauren had typed at the bottom of his document that Priya had mentioned in passing. The way Priya mentioned everything gently accurately, without editorializing. His mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What's stopping you?" "Lily," he said immediately. "Lily," his mother repeated. Who at 9 years old named a cat Gerald after a healthcare executive? That's not... Connor, that child is going to be fine anywhere you take her. She's fine because of you. A pause. What else? He opened his mouth, closed it. I don't know if I'm ready, he said finally. The honest answer. The one underneath all the other answers. Baby, his mother said gently. Nobody is ready. Ready is what you feel about 6 months after you've already done the thing. She paused. Is this the kind of thing you want to do? He thought about the conference room in Milwaukee. About 6 talking points he'd read without looking at the page. About Marsh's eyes not moving from his face. About Lauren saying not anymore. You're not when he'd called himself a copywriter. About the 42-page document with his name on it. About Diana Croft spending 4 weeks trying to find a reason to disagree with Gerald Marsh. Yes, he said. Then you're ready, his mother said. Call the woman back. He called Diana Croft the next morning. They talked for an hour and 20 minutes. By the end of it, he had been offered the position formally, the terms laid out, the timeline established. January start, relocation package. A role that was, and Diana had said this plainly, without performance, built for someone who understood that brand language was not decoration, but architecture, not surface, but structure. The kind of role that had been waiting for the specific combination of things he was. He accepted on a Thursday afternoon, 5 months to the day after a Tuesday morning when Lauren Sterling had called him at 7:03 and changed the direction of everything. He told Lauren in person. Walked up to the executive floor. He still felt a ghost of the old self-consciousness doing it probably always would, and knocked on her open door. She looked up from whatever she was reading. He said, I took it. She set down the document, and she smiled, not the corner of the mouth shadow, not the almost there, the real one. The full one, he'd first seen across a room service meal in Milwaukee, when he'd told her about Lily and the trampoline. "Good," she said. "I want you to know," he said, "that leaving Meridian is the hardest professional decision I've ever made. I know, and that whatever I build in London—" He stopped, steadied himself. "I'm going to do what you told me. Pass it on. Find the person in the back of the room who's been writing other people's speeches. Put them in front of the room." Lauren held his gaze. Something moved across her face, that thing he'd learned to recognize over these months, the small seismic event behind the composure. The place where what she actually felt lived. "That's the whole point," she said quietly. "That's always been the whole point." He nodded, turned to go, got to the door. "Connor." He turned. She was looking at him with the focused, unreadable attention he'd first felt on a plane over Lake Michigan and had spent 5 months learning to understand. What it meant, he now knew, was not evaluation. It was the look of a person who saw you, actually saw you, the whole complicated particular shape of you, and was choosing to say so without words, because words were never quite sufficient for it. "Tell Lily I said good luck with Gerald," she said. He laughed, a real laugh, sudden and unguarded, the kind Lily would have approved of. "She'll want to know how you know about the cat." "Tell her some bosses pay attention." She picked up her document. "Go home, Connor." He went home. He sat at the kitchen table that night. Same table, same quiet house, same hour, same cold coffee. And he told Lily about London. He'd been planning it for 3 days, constructing the conversation in his head, the way he constructed copy, testing different openings, different framings, worrying about her reaction with the particular parental anxiety of a man who had exactly one person in the world whose opinion truly terrified him. Lily listened to all of it with the focused, gap-toothed seriousness of a child who understood that this was an important conversation and was giving it appropriate weight. She didn't interrupt. She let him finish. Then she sat for a moment. "Is it a good job?" she said. "It's a great job." "Will I still go to Emma's sometimes?" "Emma can visit us in London." He held his breath. "We'll have a guest room." She thought about this. "Does London have good waffles?" "Lily, I'm being serious, Daddy. This is important." He looked at his daughter, at the gap between her teeth and the t-shirt she was still wearing, the scientist one, and the absolute pragmatic clarity of a 9-year-old who had learned early that if your parent was going to figure things out, you might as well let them, and your job was to make sure the practical details were covered. "London has excellent waffles," he said. "Probably." She nodded decisively. "Okay." She slid off her chair. "Can Gerald come?" "Gerald is Emma's cat, Lily. Emma might want to visit a lot. I think Emma's mom might have feelings about—" "I'm going to bed," Lily said with the air of someone who had completed a successful negotiation. "Night, Daddy." She stopped at the doorway, turned back the way he turned back the habit they shared without knowing they'd taught each other. "I'm proud of you," she said, completely natural, completely matter-of-fact, the way she said everything important. He sat at the table after she was gone and felt the sentence settle over him like a hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you. 9 years old. Not are you sure, or what about my school, or I'm scared. Just, I'm proud of you." The way his mother said it. The way Lauren didn't say it, but meant it in every decision she'd made since a Tuesday morning 6 months ago. He picked up his pen, opened the notepad, the one with 6 talking points in fading ink, and "This is not a fluke" written at the top in his own hand. He turned to a new page. He wrote the date, and then he wrote because he'd learned in the past 5 months that the things worth keeping needed to be written down in your own handwriting, or they had a way of becoming abstract, of losing their specific weight. "What Milwaukee taught me, what I want to remember." He wrote for 40 minutes, not the framework, not copy, not professional language, just the truth of it in the plainest words he had. That someone seeing you before you can see yourself is the most disorienting and necessary gift a person can give another. that the research you do when no one is watching is the truest expression of who you are. That small is a choice, not a condition, and that you can unmake it, not loudly, not dramatically, but in one hotel room, one conversation, one moment of deciding not to hide behind your own competence. That a 9-year-old asking about waffles in London is not a small thing. It is the whole thing. It is a child who trusts you enough to move her world when you move yours. That leadership. Real leadership, the kind that lasts, is not about standing at the front of the room. It is about seeing who should be there and making sure they get to stand there before they believe they deserve to. He read what he'd written, capped his pen. He thought about Lauren at 10:15 at night, her office lit, reading 42 pages for the second time and typing, "I knew it was you" at the bottom of a cover page. He thought about Gerald Marsh texting him after 9 about the best brand thinking in 20 years. He thought about Diana Croft spending 4 weeks looking for a reason to disagree and finding none. He thought about Marcus, who had said "I'm sorry" in the awkward, unpolished way of a person who doesn't apologize easily, and had meant it. He thought about his mother. Ready is what you feel 6 months after you've already done the thing. He thought about a car in the early dark of a Tuesday morning, and the sound of a door opening 2 blocks from his apartment, and a woman in a charcoal blazer settling into the seat beside him, with the composure of someone who had already decided something he hadn't found out about yet. He thought about an accordion folder full of research no one had asked for. He thought about 6 talking points in his own handwriting face down on a side table untouched. He thought about standing up and opening his mouth and saying, "Here's the problem," to a room full of people waiting to see whether he would be enough. And he had been. Not because Lauren had made him enough, not because Milwaukee had made him enough, but because he had always been enough. The capacity had always been there, built from every midnight hour and every invisible effort and every moment he'd cared about the work more than the credit. And what Milwaukee had done, what Lauren had done, was simply refuse to let him keep pretending otherwise. He closed the notepad, put it in the drawer beside the 6 folded talking points he'd kept since the day of the pitch. He'd been keeping them the way you keep a thing that reminds you of the exact moment something changed, not as a trophy, but as evidence. Proof against the voice that would on hard days try to tell him it wasn't real. He turned off the kitchen light, walked down the hall, checked on Lily asleep, arm off the bed again, same as always. He put it back, pulled up the blanket, stood in the doorway. In 4 months, they'd be in London. New school, new city, new everything. She would adapt in the way of children who have been raised by someone who figured things out, rather than folded under them, because that's what she'd watched her father do every single day, even when he didn't know she was watching. Especially then. He turned off her lamp, and Connor Hayes, who had spent 2 years learning to be small and 5 months learning to stop, walked down the quiet hall of his quiet house, carrying nothing heavier than his own name. Which it turned out was exactly enough to carry him anywhere he needed to go.